Hello, I'm recording now. Alright. I just want to see where I want to. Yeah, those good kitty scritches. Alright. Where do I want to leave off? Eternal edifice. Pretty. Ooh, okay. Let's see if I can do that. I think I can. I'm only going to be reading until 3. Uh, uh. Okay, I think I know where I want to leave off. Alright. So, chapter 23 The City of Ether. Man, I do like the whole. Alright. Yeah, I think I know where I'm gonna leave off for today. Alright. So, chapter 22. No, not 22. 23. The City of Ether. May woke to wet drops landing on her face. She blinked her eyes. Large green drops were falling from the sky, and John the Gibber was sitting beside her. He had her knapsack in his hands. Time to go, lass. May sat up, her eyes darting to her bag. What's happening? John laughed. Just a little ectoplasm shower. Get your house ghosts up and let's go. He handed her the sack as if that's what he'd been meaning to do. May looked at it for a moment, uneasy. Oh. Is my content? Alright, are we good? Are we back? Are we back online? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? La 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 la. Can you hear me? I've been talking this whole time. Okay. Nice. Where did you last Did you hear any of what I said or Ah, I see. It's fine. I wasn't reading that much. Okay. Alright, let's start over again. Chapter 23. The City of Ether. May woke up to wet drops landing on her face. She blinked her eyes. Large green drops were falling from the sky, and John the Gibber was sitting beside her. He had her knapsack in his hands. Time to go, lass. May sat up, her eyes darting to her bag. What's happening? John laughed. Just a little ectoplasm shower. Get your house ghost up and let's go. He handed her the sack as if that's what he'd been meaning to do. May looked at it for a moment, uneasy. She shook Pumpkin awake. He grunted and sat up, rubbing his eyes and looking around. He grinned it pleasantly at May, let out a long, leisurely yawn. Oh, sorry, I just yawned right now. Sorry, spoiler alert, I am Pumpkin. He grinned pleasantly at May, let out a long, leisurely yawn. Then, goddamn, I want to yawn again. Oh, man. You don't know, man. Pumpkin has some major character development throughout this whole fucking series. But you guys don't know that yet, because none of that has happened. Well, he was brave enough to go save her from the water demon. And then he was brave enough for him to, like, take her to you know, that they got on the boat and then they went to the southern territories. So he is pretty brave. You know, he could get sucked up into nothingness. He could, you know, be banished or something. I don't know. Something bad. Alright. Good. Okay. Hopefully that's the last yawn, because, man, leisurely yawn. That sounds nice. Okay. He grinned pleasantly at May, let out a long, leisurely yawn, and he stuck out his purple tongue to collect a few ectoplasm drops. Can't I sleep a little longer? May groaned and pulled him up. They climbed the hill together behind John. Look lively, Pumpkin. There'll be no time for your laziness today, John chided. Pumpkin stuck out his tongue at John's back, but sucked it in again when he saw May frowning at him. Just as they reached the ridge and Pumpkin got a view of the city, he thrust his fingers into his mouth and dropped his mischievous mood altogether. John had knelt down and was digging in the dirt, and now he pulled out a handful of worms and centipedes and then dropped them into May's hair and down into her bathing suit. Ah! May jumped up and down, trying to brush them off. Stand still, girl, John said, grabbing her wrist to stop her from jumping. Do you want to make it past the sniffing phantoms or not? May considered. Then she let her arms drop to her sides. Now, I gathered some mold this morning, and I've got this stuff on the bottom of my shoe that's been there for about 50 years. John reached beneath the shoe and pulled out a decayed mass of brown goo. Then he rubbed it over both hands and smeared it on May's arms and legs. May thought she might vomit. She retched a few times and held her nose. There. That gets rid of the living scent nicely. Now for me. John reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny bottle of clear liquid, then squirted himself several times. May read the label. Crook begone. Mr. Gibber, shouldn't this wait till we're closer to the city? What do you mean, lass? Well, won't it wear off before we get there? My dear, it'll take us 10 minutes to get to the city. Perhaps 15. May blinked at him several times and looked across the wide plain separating them from the tiny city in the distance. It had to be hundreds of miles away. Really? It's all right. It's right there. John pointed in the same direction when she was looking at it. But John was pointed in the same direction she already. Ugh. Ugh. Sorry, I yawned again. John pointed in the same direction she was already looking. But it'll take days to get there. She looked at Pumpkin as if to verify she wasn't crazy. Pumpkin, though, he didn't need to cover up his normal ghost scent, had dug up a handful of worms anyway, and was dropping them into his ragged shirt one by one. The city of Ether's in a wormhole, he said, absently, dangling. The city of Ether's in a wormhole, he said absently, dangling a long, slimy worm next to his neck. Everybody knows that. John started walking across the field, with Pumpkin trapezing along behind him with his worms, leaving May with no choice but to follow. She trailed behind, only noticing after several steps that something strange was happening to the view as they walked. The farther John and Pumpkin got from May, the bigger they seemed to get, compared to the city. Or was it that the city was getting smaller? Yes. The more they walked, the less and less the city looked like something huge in the distance, and more like something tiny on the ground. May hurried to keep up with them, catching up breathlessly when they came to a halt. All three of them stared down at each other. There was the city, the size of an anthill. It reached to May's shins and was surrounded by thousands of tiny curved pebbles stuck in the ground. The spiral pattern was furrowed in the dirt encircling the city scene. Wow, May said, kneeling. To her astonishment, she could just make out tiny figures drifting up and down the trees. I can't believe it. She reached out a hand to touch the top of the tallest building. She reached out a hand to touch the top of the tallest building, a white structure that towered over the rest of the city. But as she did, a powerful zap traveled up and down her spine, knocking her backward. She landed on the ground with a thud. My, you're daft, lass. It's protected, of course. Wouldn't do it all if it weren't, John said. Thanks for warning me, May muttered, standing up, embarrassed. John and Pumpkin looked at each other, then at her, and then burst into laughter. What? May went to pat her hair and noticed it was sticking straight up. Oh! a tiny smile snuck onto her lips. She stuck her hands in the dirt and grabbed two fistfuls, rubbing them into her hair. Don't you know about wormholes, dearie? John asked when she was finished, wiping a jolly tear from his eye. May shook her head. There are lots of them all over the realm, but this is the biggest one. Wormholes make space all distorted, so a giant city can fit into a tiny area. May stared at it. But how do we get in there? Why, right here. Why, right there. John nodded to his left. Beaten through the dirt a few feet away was a smooth path that seemed to lead forward, away from the city. A sign beside it announced that it to be Pain in the Foot Trail. Well, come on then, John said, walking ahead. Pumpkin and May trailed behind him. The city trickled to a stop. Ugh. The train trickled to a stop. Though the trail had looked like it would go straight, it actually curved hard to the left a few paces in, and curved, making a wide circle around the city. What are we doing? May asked. Aye, lass, it's a wonder you ever made it to the grotto in the first place with that feeble mind of yours. We're going to the city, remember? May scowled, feeling foolish. But we're walking in circles. We're walking in a spiral, John answered, shaking his head in exasperation. Yes, a spiral, and Pumpkin added in a superior tone, also shaking his head. May fought back a sigh of frustration. She didn't know how that was much different, but she kept her mouth shut. And after a few seconds, she realized where the city had gotten smaller before, it was now bigger, closer. With every few steps, it got much larger in front of them, the spikes that surrounded it taking on a more distinct shape. By the time the path finally came to an end, May had gone speechless. They were at the edge of an enormous, desolate cemetery filled with tens of thousands of gravestones. Across it gaped the enormous city of Ether. Oh, Pumpkin moaned. May moaned in her heart, too. It looked to be 100 times the size of New York, which, in the St. Agatha's brochures, had looked gigantic. It glowed brightly, with an enormous slate gray rock walls surrounding it, and impossible rooftops, and impossible rooftops reaching toward the stars. And these were all dwarfed by the tallest buildings, the soaring spire of which disappeared into the dusky starry sky, so that the point of it was invisible. There, John pointed, a bony, dirt-caked finger. Uh, John pointed a bony, dirt-caked finger toward the place where the spire disappeared into the sky. Is where the book lies. Pumpkin laid out another groan. Oh, May whispered, feeling very small in all sorts of ways. Up there? It was so high. Way, way too high. May thanked her lucky stars that John the Gibber was with them. Maybe he would go up to the top and bring the book down. Without him, she would have turned around right then and there and given up. Beneath the shadow of the city and the wall and the outside of and outside never mind. Let me what was I? All right. Sorry, I just got really lost. Beneath the shadow of the city and outside the wall, a huge shape was moving back and forth, with what looked like arms stretching out and making long scooping motions toward the ground. Is that? May brushed her soggy hair aside. The South Gate sniffing phantom. John finished for her. Sure is. And this. John pointed to the field full of millions of headstones and gaping grave holes, is where the city ghosts come for haunting. May's eyes met Pumpkin's. Well, we best get you moving, Well, we best get moving, you two. We want to miss rush hour, that's certain. Mate tightened her death shroud around her and started walking. They picked their way. They picked their way across the graves, which May realized were what appeared as pebbles from above. She and Pumpkin zigzagged back and forth uh, behind John the Gibber, careful not to get too close to any of the holes for fear of falling in. John was a faster zigzagger, however, and he was soon several feet ahead of them. Now, no need to be squeamish, you two. Now's not the time for lollygagging. When the balls on that yonder church ring midnight, the spirits will come out for work. And if we're out here then, we'll have our work cut out for us. May tried to pick up her pace, stepping faster around the stones and taking longer strides. That's it. Come on. John turned his gaunt, curved back toward them and picked up his pace. Up ahead, May could see a bridge rising from the ground to the top of the gate, and a line of spirits straggling its way along it. Uh, the sniffing phantom stood beside the bridge like a tall white pillar. He glowed with faint light, white light, and had a face of an old man covered in snow, with droopy, wrinkled eyelids over pale gray eyes, each the size of a small house. His nose was the most striking and exceptional feature. It was large and hooked, and had enormous flaring nostrils, to which he lifted one spirit after another with his massive palms. Yeah, we got a sight of the sniffing phantoms. Um, Here, let me send you a picture. These are the sniffing phantoms. These are what they look like. So the sniffing phantom stood behind the bridge like a tall white pillar. He glowed with faint white light and had a face of an old man covered in snow, with droopy, wrinkled eyelids over pale gray eyes, each the size of a small house. His nose was his most striking feature, most striking and exceptional feature. It was large and hooked, and had enormous flaring nostrils. No, they're not cute. Oh man, you thought they were gonna be cute looking? No, 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 no. They're not cute. Alright. It was large and hooked, and it had enormous flaring nostrils, to which he lifted one spirit after another with his massive palms. Each time he did, he made a deafening sniffing sound, and the spirit in his hands was sucked right up into one of his nostrils. He had to blow hard to get it out, using his hands as a hanky and catching the spirit before laying it down on the bridge again and nudging it toward a small archway through which it disappeared. Pumpkin reached for May's hand, his frigid white fingers finding their way into hers. On the walls of this on the walls of the city, huge stone gargoyles perched, looking ready to pounce and wearing hollow pix cameras strapped around their necks. You Behind them rose a giant clock tower, announcing the time to be 11 minutes before midnight. Behind the phantom was a giant green can emblazoned with the word incinerator. Oh wait, no, it's not incinerator. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Even though I've said it like twice. It's incarnerator. Incarnerator. I've been saying it wrong the whole time I've known this book. Incarnerator. Yeah. Feel like that doesn't sound right, but it is right. Incarnerator. That's what it says. Incinerator, my god. Okay. Um Sorry, I just had to find my place again. Um Yeah, behind the phantom was a giant green can emblazoned with the word incarnerator and covered tightly with a lid. Make it see. When John turned to look back at her, that make it see when John turned to look back at her, that a deep wrinkle had creased his brow. Almost forgot. Don't forget to hold your breath, lassie. Breath smell is a dead giveaway. The fear on his face made May's own courage falter. She adjusted her death shroud nervously. Are you okay, Mr. Gibber? I'm a bit nervous, that's all. Listen, if we get separated for any reason, we're staying at the Final Rest Hotel, room 9999. Got it? Sorry, I'm just lost right now. um, I'm a bit nervous, that's all. Listen, if we get separated for any reason, we're staying at the Final Rest Hotel, room 9999. Got it? We won't get separated, will we? John grinned falsely, showing his black rotted teeth. Nah, you got nothing to worry about. They got to the foot of the bridge, May and Pumpkin's heads falling back on their necks to stare up at the phantom. Oh my, Pumpkin groaned. May tightened her grip on his hand. It'll be okay, she whispered. Well, hold on to your booty, John said. May tugged at Pumpkin's hand and they followed him up the walk. The group of spirits in front of them appeared to be a family of three, two parents and a very little girl. The girl kept turning to toggle at May and make funny faces. May crouched down and made funny faces back. Why are you going to the city? The girl asked, her eyes large and gaunt. I'm looking for something important. What about you? Mommy says the territories aren't safe anymore. She says that at least the high ghosts in the city will look out for us. Oh, May nodded. She wondered who the high ghosts were. The family inched ahead, the mother tugging her daughter along by her hand. Her small feet floated out behind her as she was dragged. Then she came to rest again above the walkway, the tatters of her ragged dress settling down. Uh, her small feet floated down out behind her uh, as she was dragged. Then she came to rest again above the wall.
Yes, there's some steak.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. Where was I? I was at um. May nodded. She wondered who the high ghosts were. The family inched ahead, the mother tugging her daughter along by the hand. Oh wait, I already read this. Then she came to rest again above the walkway, the tatters of her ragged dress settling around her. Pumpkin May held Pumpkin's hand tighter, watching the spirits being lifted and sucked one by one into the phantom's nose, then dropped by a small archway up top. Each floated through the arch and disappeared, seeming to fall out of sight. Some gave a little squeal as they went. The giant white hand descended right in front of May, pinching the mother between one giant thumb and one giant forefinger, and lifting her way up out of sight. It was all May could do. It was all May could do to keep from stumbling backward. The mother came back down and waited there for the rest of her family. The same happened to the father. While she waited, her big blue eyes huge, the little girl locked her gaze on May. Then her eyes seemed to widen in recognition. "You're not dead," she whispered. A shock ran its way up and down May's spine. "Yes, I am," she lied. But the girl was watching into the top of her dress, and in another moment, oh no, the girl was reaching into the top of her dress, and in another moment, the gleaming bogey whistle appeared. "No, you're not." The girl narrowed her eyes and lifted the whistle to her tiny pink lips, just as the large fingers descended and lifted her up. The whistle was knocked out of her hands, and the girl disappeared into the air. When she came back down, she gaped at May in horror, then ran toward her mother, while the enormous hand closed around May's body and lifted her up. May felt the roller coaster feeling in her stomach dropping in the air as she sped up through the air, up, and up. She was being lifted so fast that the force blew her black hair around her face, and some of the cockroaches flew out. As soon as she caught her breath, she sucked it in and held it, her cheeks puffing out like balloons. She had a stabbing, prickling feeling she had gotten in the third grade when she cheated on a math test. It was the throbbing, gut pounding feeling that she was a big fake about to be caught. The giant fingers rolled her into the palm of his phantom hand, and May sat up, face to face with a gaping nostril that was twice as wide as May was tall. There was a great roaring sniff, and May went flying upward, her body catching deep in the nostril like a plug. Everything around her had gone black, and May wriggled, nearly retching as she realized she was rubbing against a layer of slime, her lungs ready to burst. Sniff, sniff, sniff. With every sniff, May was pulled upward, deeper into the nose, her bare arms rubbing against the slime. She couldn't hold her breath anymore. The phantom began to blow. Puff. May's breath went rushing out of her. As quickly as it happened, she sucked in more air and closed her mouth again. But it was too late. There was another loud sniff, and she was sucked back in. Sniff. She could feel the phantom's. Yep. Gross, man. Very gross. She she could feel the phantom's head tilting slightly. Sniff, 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 sniff. Please, please, please. Ding. For a moment, everything around May vibrated, and then she shot out of the phantom's nose in a big huff. Ding. To her left, the clock tower was striking 12, and she peered over the phantom's giant thumb to see that the gate had cracked open, and that crowds of spirits, thousands, had begun pouring out into the cemetery. The phantom gave May another gentler sniff, then began to lower her. Again, May's stomach dropped as she sailed through the air before arriving back down at the top of the wall and landing gently onto the walkway. She put her hand over her chest. Her heart was thumping against her ribs heavily. She peered around for the little girl with the whistle and met her sunken blue eyes as she was being dragged away by her mother. That's nonsense, honey, May could hear the woman saying as they disappeared through the archway. There are no live ones in the ever after. The girl extended her pointer finger one last time toward May. Then a twin pair of squeal, and then a twin pair of squeals, and they were gone. Pumpkin was the next to disappear. He came back quickly, smiling with pride. I don't know what you two were worried about, he said, brushing his hands together as if he had actually accomplished something. And then John the Gibber went up. May squeezed up against Pumpkin nervously and watched the sky. Far above them, the phantom pulled John close to his face, sucked him into his nose, then quickly puffed him out. A hiss of white breath came out of his mouth. No, sir. John John's voice echoed down to the bridge, sharp and edgy as a knife. Knave? I have been told I smell like knave before, but no, sir. Never nicked a thing in this life or the other one. May tightened her grip on Pumpkin, her whole body going cold. The eyes of several of the spirits on the bridge glued themselves onto the scene above. Not even a puck of gum. A good, honest boy I've always... Sir, I resent that. If you just put me down, I'll forgive your rudeness. Wait, no! The phantom's hand swung downward, toward the incarnerator. The lid flew open, all on its own, with a creak. Everywhere, spirits peered toward the spot. Murmurs drifted from the crowd. Pumpkin, May whispered, grabbing Pumpkin. No! An, agon- uh, an agonizing moment passed. An agonizing moment passed as the giant hand John's legs soared. John's legs swung into view, and then the rest of him, so that he was dangling from the phantom finger. Hurling himself with gymnastic-like grace, he swung from the giant pinky onto the phantom sleeve, and then began to clamber up his arm, holding tight to the fabric of the cloak. May had to clamp her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. The crowd of spirits itself was stunned into silence. Its surface spiky, its surface spiky with pointing fingers. John scrambled down to the phantom's chest, but with long, but with one long, gaunt arm, the phantom swiped at him, and he went flying into the air. He landed onto the sand below. He landed on the sand below the walkway. Oh, Pumpkin moaned. He looked at May. Do something! May was rooted in her spot helplessly, her mind racing. Do what? What in the world could she do? Do what? What in the world could she do? Okay. Several hundred spirits backed into a wide circle around John, who backed away at May. He looked back at May once in a horror-stricken plea for help. May held the fabric of her death shroud in both hands. She dropped to her knees and tore open her knapsack, rifling through it for something, anything that might help. Maybe she threw John a teleport token or used the comfort blanket too, and then she stopped. The photo of May and the Amazon, the Amazon, stared back at her. May glanced up. John had turned and run into the crowd, but for all his many steps, the phantom took just one and plucked him out easily. Again, giant hands swung him toward the incarnerator. May looked back down at the photo and set her jaw. She was that girl. With renewed courage, May clasped the hem of her death shroud as she rose from her knees. Wait! She yelled at the top of her lungs. In one flash movement, she whipped off her shroud and waved it violently above her head, then shoved it into Pumpkin's arms. Over here! Silence fell over those nearest her, and all eyes, even those of the phantom, turned to May. For a moment, everyone froze. Then the spirits on the bridge went into chaos, plunging off the sides, rushing away from her, screaming. Within seconds, most of them had their bogey whistles to their lips. The phantom stumbled backward. As he did, he dropped John right into the incarnerator. May screamed. Pumpkin screamed. The John scream was the most earth-shattering shriek May had ever heard. The gibber went hurtling into the can. At the same moment, the phantom's hands took a giant defensive swipe at May and Pumpkin. Seeing it just in time, May grabbed her knapsack with one hand and the back of Pumpkin's shirt with the other, and yanked him through the archway. Still screaming, they flew forward, landing on a silver slide that swept them downward, hurtling them into a pile on the ground inside the city gates. They quickly pulled each other up, clutching each other's arms like survivors of a shipwreck. At a glance, they saw they were on a wide boulevard that shot like an arrow between the enormous buildings of Ether. Alleys stretched this way and that off the boulevard, and all around them stood a horrible and all around them stood a horde of stunned spirits, frozen in their activities a moment ago. Excuse me. Sorry, I just wanna. Yeah. What was I? Yeah. And all around them stood a horde of stunned spirits, frozen in their activities frozen in their activities of moments ago, pushing baby carriages, driving carriages, selling soul cakes for selling soul cakes from gleaming carts. The spirits watched the two intruders for a moment. A man in brown knickerbockers pointed and screamed, and then they all scattered like marbles. Above it all, an ear-pitching siren began to wail, and May looked up, gazing at the impossible heights of the spiky gray buildings. Hold on, I need to do something. That's okay, but I need something. Sorry, I just gotta do something real quick. Oh, there you are. There we go. No, it's too bright. Right there. Where was I? Above it all, an ear-piercing siren began to wail, and May looked up, gazing at the impossible heights of the spiky gray buildings. A deafening crack behind her brought her attention to the city wall. Oh, Pumpkin wailed. The stone gargoyles overhead had begun to move, layers of rock shattering and sliding off them, claws clenching and wings flapping. Wings flapping slowly into motion. Oh my! Both May's and Pumpkin's heads rolled back on their necks senselessly. Do you hear that? Pumpkin cried. Of course I hear, May snapped, but Pumpkin was already shaking his head. Their eyes met. The world around them seemed to go still. Not that, he said, tucking a finger in between his lips, waiting for another sound, and then pulled the finger out and pointed. That. May strained her ears. Above the siren, above the crumbling of rock behind them, there was the sound of dogs. May grabbed her shroud from Pumpkin's hands and fastened it around her neck, and then they ran. May's legs kicked behind her, throwing up gray dust and debris. Pumpkin floated at her back, covering his head with his skinny arms and hunching his shoulders. And there, May shouted, pointing to an alley just to their left. A giant swish brushed past her, and a pair of talons sliced the air next to her extended hand. She screamed and looked up to see the gaping jaws of the gargoyle poised above her head. Squawk! They entered the alley at a bursting pace, and the gargoyle vanished. May turned to see he had crashed into the entrance too. May turned to see he had crashed into the entrance, too large to fit through. Now they were in a tangle of alleys, all cutting right and left and looping in on one another. May, with Pumpkin behind, crisscrossed at a sprint, trying to dodge two, then three gargoyles that soared above, unable to squeeze into the alley behind them. Sorry. I was not paying attention to what I read in that last paragraph. I paid attention to the last part, but I was not. I was not fully paying attention. Anyways, um, now they were in a tangle of alleys, just cutting right and left and looping in on one another. May, with Pumpkin beside, crisscrossing at a sprint, decided trying to dodge two, then three gargoyles that soared above, unable to squeeze into the alley behind them, but right on their trail. Uh, Sharp talons swooped within inches of them several times, forcing them to duck or roll across the ground, then get up and keep moving. They were just turning another sharp corner when suddenly the area before them opened up into a wide space. And then, and the next thing she knew, May was tumbling forward, landing underwater with a splash. She spluttered to the surface, finding herself in a canal full of green liquid. The smell of it hit May hard, taking her breath away before she looked up to see Pumpkin, several feet in front of her on dry land, getting farther and farther away. She was being carried quickly away from him by the stream. Pumpkin! She called. Pumpkin, his arms and legs flailing, was running after her along the side of the canal, reaching his skinny arms toward her and calling, Wait! She tried to paddle back, but the current was too strong. She turned to look behind her and groaned when she saw there was a tunnel up ahead. When May looked back at Pumpkin, she had time to see a gargoyle, its talons cracking loudly, its giant teeth bared, swoop in just above his head before she disappeared into blackness. Far beyond the walls of Ether, at a settlement that was merely a gaggle of tiny triangles in the distance for anyone looking, Summer Kitty lay on his back, swatting irritably at a ball of silk thread that had been hung from the ceiling. He had already rubbed his nose and cheeks against the jewels that had been piled all over the floor for him to play with that morning. Miserably, he had batted around a golden diamond staff, watching it. Sorry, let me say that again. I got distracted. Um, Miserably, he had batted around for a gold and diamond staff, watching it roll across the floor. Occasionally, he had laid down in the sun that poured onto the chamber floor, his bald body stretching as long and drawn out as a sigh. Whenever Summer Kitty looked away from his whenever Summer Kitty looked away from his string toward the direction of the window, the sight of the tiny city on the horizon filled him with a strange sense of dread. The dread was lying heavily on his heart when he heard the door to his chamber slide open, and he hopped up, his body spinning in the air and landing on all fours. The woman standing in the doorway was the one who brought his milk tray every afternoon. She padded in, knelt on the floor in front of him, and bowed. Then she poured the milk into the gilded bowl by his bed. As she repeated this ritual now, somebody scanned the area behind her, his tail going straight as a lightning rod. Usually when a woman walked into the chamber, she closed the door behind her. The doorway seemed to wink at Somber Kitty, and Somber Kitty's ears twitched in reply. His slitty green eyes moved to the woman, then leaning over to the bowl and dribbling honey into the milk. Then the eyes moved to the door, back and forth. Somber Kitty's body coiled up like a bed spring. He knew if he hesitated, the moment would be lost. In one glorious movement, He flew across the room, not landing until he was already through the door. Behind him, he heard the woman yell something, but he was already moving, dashing down the dark hallway, his claws sliding along the stone so that he bumped into every wall he met. Finally, he came to a place where he could either turn right or left. Again, without a moment's hesitation, he turned left and ran in full speed, somehow coming to a perfect, graceful halt right at a huge square opening. He teetered at the edge of the open air, glancing along, glancing along. Um, he teetered at the edge of the open air, and along the wall that angled out beneath him. He surveyed the scene on the ground below, and possibly far below. He looked at he looked behind him, seeing the group of guards running toward him. Then he leaped forward, curled himself into a ball, and rolled. And that is the end of that chapter. Dun dun dun! I think I'll only be able to read one more chapter, and this chapter is pretty long. Stress rising. Dun dun dun! Yeah, I think I'm only going to be able to do this chapter. It's 15 pages, and the other one is a lot about the same. So I'm going to just do this one more chapter. Okay. Chapter 24. May alone. It was several minutes before May emerged into the light again. She had just begun to think this was how her life would end, drowning in a stream of ectoplasm, when the glimmer of dusky light made its way into the darkness, and she finally drifted out into the open air. She caught at the brick poking out of the sidewalk above and latched onto it, dragging herself onto the cobblestones and finally putting her death shroud over herself. Panting hard, she looked around and saw that she was in a deserted alley lined along one side with solemn, gray, ornately carved buildings. Wherever she drifted, it was very quiet and far from the chaos of the boulevard. The gargoyles were gone. Pumpkin was gone. John the Gibber was gone. May hung her head between her knees, fighting back the sharp pain in her heart. In the distance, she could hear the sound of dogs somewhere in the city. She was completely alone. May fell onto her back, watching the zipping stars, which tonight were covered lightly in clouds, and feeling the darkest despair. It's all my fault, she squeaked to the sky, thinking of John and Lucius and Pumpkin. She closed her eyes, her lids forcing twin tears out of the corners and down her cheeks where they hid in her ectoplasm-soaked hair. Pumpkin, Lucius, and John were gone, and she was still a million miles away from her home. May curled into a tight ball on her side and lay still for a long time. Whenever she'd been sad at home, she always had Somber Kitty to tuck up in her arms to catch her tears on top of his soft ears. Now she had nobody. When May finally opened her eyes again, she rolled slowly onto her back and blinked at the sky, squinting at the strange cloud that had settled directly above her. It took a familiar shape of a tree with eyes peering down at her. May scrambled to sit up, but by the time she did, then blinked at the sky again, the cloud had been blown into a new shape. May looked around and adjusted her shroud nervously. Slowly, She climbed to her feet and gazed at the sky again. Was the lady looking out for her or frowning down on her? I just want everything to be like it was before, she said out loud. A scrock sound a scrock. A scrock sounded in the distance. May shivered. She should probably hide for a while, just in case. And then when the city had calmed down and the sound of dogs had died, she could go look for Pumpkin, if there was any hope of finding him at all. She scanned the street again. The building straight ahead of her stood wide open. Above the door it read, Mausoleum 387A. Walking very slowly, May peered through the open doorway. The mausoleum was pitch dark inside, clearly deserted. She sniffed. Hold on, I need to readjust myself real quick. All right. The mausoleum was pitch dark inside, clearly deserted. She shifted from foot to foot, then stared up at the sky, then back at the door. She walked into the mausoleum at a snail's pace, feeling her way along the wall. Psst, psst. Voices were whispering in the darkness. May shrank back against the wall, her heart racing. Suddenly, a blue flame leaped into the darkness, illuminating a tall starlight and a man holding it, surrounded by a circle of other spirits. May shrank farther into a corner and tried to make her breathing as low and quiet as possible. You see? That wasn't so bad, the man holding the starlight said, pushing his glasses up onto the bridge of his nose with his free hand. Now let's try this again. Laura, this time you do the honors. A pretty woman with curly black hair leaned forward and blew out the light. Ho! The voices chimed in from all over. Ho! The inside of May's throat began to itch from the dry and stuffy air of the room. She dared to put her hand to her throat to rub it. The candle leaped back to life, and she froze. You see? Oh, oh, ooh, ooh. 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 Yeah, that's what they're really saying. Alright. You see? If you just do your ooh, who chant, it'll really calm you down. Feel the positive energy. Say your. May couldn't help it. It was one of those coughs that just popped out. The spirit with the starlight locked his eyes on her. The others turned to follow his gaze and shifted around in surprise. The woman with the black curly hair frowned, her upper body having come detached from her lower body at the waist, and absently pulled herself back together again. May waited for a scream, pointing fingers. The ghost who'd been speaking cleared his throat. Hi, friend. Can we help you? Uh, um, yes, I'm lost. I just stepped in here by mistake. Sorry about that. I'll be. May was tiptoeing toward the door. Wait! Her stomach doing a little flip. May turned. You're not really lost, are you? Um, it's nothing to be ashamed of, the man said. You've come to the right place. Mausoleum 3387A. We don't judge one another here. I'm Albert. I'm May. Well, May, lots of specters are scared of the dark. Albert smiled warmly, especially those who died at night. Laura here just got in from a night boating accident. How did you die, May? May's May's mind raced back to the night of the lake. Um, I drowned. It was probably at night, am I right? May nodded. That'll do it. I myself died in a caving accident in Peru. Don't worry, you'll get over it. We were just doing our darkness chants. Something to help you feel less afraid when you're assigned a house to haunt. Have you gone to get your assignment yet? You can be arrested if you don't, you know. May shook her head, befuddled. Well, anyway, here's the chant. Albert pursed. For fun. Yeah, man, they're doing this for fun. They're trying to get, just so they're not so fearful. They're doing this for fun. It's therapy for them, man. Reliving your death is a therapy. At least in this book. Alright. Well, anyway, here's the chant. Albert pursed his lips, his eyes on May's. Ho. You try it. May glanced at the doorway again. Okay, here we go. I'm going to blow out the starlight candle. Are you ready? Everyone nodded and muttered that they were. Albert held out the candle for May to blow on. She did, and joined in when everyone else started hooing. Hooing? Yeah. They did this several more times. Oh, thank you. I feel so much better. Thank you, May said, backing up quickly. Wait. No, I really have to go. Well, if you must. But be careful out there. The Gargoyles have been out. Supposedly, there's a live one on the loose. May froze. Say what you want, but I feel sorry for that poor soul. Say what you want, but I feel sorry for that poor soul, one woman said, shaking her head and tisking. Can you imagine running into one? That would be the thrill of my afterlife. I'd have my whistle to my lips faster than you can say undead, another woman added. Everyone agreed. And I heard there was a knave helping her, and a ghost. My wife was just calling about it. Albert looked around at the other specters, apologetically gesturing to the small scolophone chipped to his belt. Of all the unlikely... Did the ghost get away? May leaped forward, startling Albert. Oh dear, don't scare me like that. She didn't say. She said the knave was incarnerated. May's stomach flopped sickly. And, oh, wait, the ghost? Let's see. She did say, I think he's escaped frightful, ugly ghost by reports. So many ghosts are. May, her insides lighting up with hope, rushed toward the door. Then, on second thought, she turned around one last time. Hey, do you know where the final rest hotel is? She gushed. May knew it was unlikely Pumpkin would even remember the name, but if he did, he might find his way there. Albert tapped his chin. I think it's on Suicide. Not a very pretty place. Dude, I just noticed this now, but fucking okay. The place that he said it was on, it was probably Sewerside, which is sewer, side. But it sounds like suicide, and I'm just like, wow. I don't know if that was intentional, but that's dark. So many grim puns, I know, man. Man, damn, that's fucked up. I mean, it's cool in a way, but it's also kind of yeah. All right. Albert tapped his chin. I think it's on Sewerside. Not a very pretty place. Are you sure you want to go there? Thank you. May slid out and looked both ways, up and down the narrow cobblestone street. May walked through the city like a ghost, mixing with spirits up and down the busy streets, and drifting through the dark alleyways that crisscrossed Ether like a giant web, searching for Pumpkin. She had decided the hotel would be her last resort. Most likely, if Pumpkin had escaped, he was somewhere in the city, lost. All around were marble mausoleums, small pointy churches, tall apartment buildings with broken windows and fire-singed doorways, grand hotels with vaulted roofs, and old stone cottages, temples, and shrines. Every time May turned a corner, she expected to see Pumpkin standing down the next street, but the city was vast and crowded, and she finally began to feel discouraged. She wondered if she shouldn't head straight to the final rest after all. She came to a stop in front of Spectre Sweets. Yeah, she came to a stop in front of Spectre's Sweet, which had a variety of skeleton bread and skull cakes in the window beneath. Um, which had a variety of skeleton bread and skull cakes in the window, beneath a sign that read fresh. Sacrificed today at various world altars. May's stomach growled. She laid down her bag on the bare sidewalk next to a skull-phone booth and rummaged through it. All of her food was covered in green gook, and most of it had disintegrated. She looked back up at the sign, then into her bag again, pulling out one of her transport tokens. Then she squared her shoulders and walked into the shop. I want 3 of those soul cakes, she said loudly, pointing to the second shelf behind the chubby man at the register, who wore a big white baker's hat. But will you take this for them? She couldn't remember ever being. She couldn't remember being. She couldn't ever. She couldn't remember ever being so bold with a stranger in her life, but the words had come out easily. She blushed and held out the token. The man surveyed the token and grinned at her. Oui. May handed over her coin, and the man grabbed a pair of tongs and lifted 3 soul cakes into a bag. Thank you. Newly dead, eh? Nearly. This guy has a French accent, and I don't know how to do accents. Ho ho, oui oui, ho ho. Sorry if I'm being stereotypical. Stereotypical. Not trying to. It's just I don't know how to do these accents. Newly dead, huh? He asked with a thick French accent. May nodded. Yes, sir. Don't forget to pick up your house assignment. Assignment. Sorry, I'm really trying. Don't forget to pick up your house assignment, he advised. May thanked him, then stepped out into the street and bit into her first soul cake ravenously, hardly noticing where her feet were carrying her. When she looked up, she stumbled backward a few steps. Ahead of her was the edifice, gleaming white against the gray of the other buildings, several blocks wide, and soaring into the sky. May craned her head back onto her neck to take it in, unable to see where the building ended. Then slid her eyes back down the sides to stare at the gleaming golden doors, shielding her eyes from the glow. Finally, she took in the area around her. She was standing in a large square packed with thousands of spirits, ghosts, and specters milling along in one endless line that curled around itself over and over again, its tail disappearing around the corner and down a wide boulevard. For a moment, May shrank back with a shock, sure that the crowd had something to do, sure that the crowd had something to do with her, that they all that they all had gathered because they heard there was a live one in the city. Hold on, just 1 second. Sorry, I just got lost. It's impressive, isn't it? A teenage girl in overalls, missing her left arm, had just floated in front of her. May focused on her with difficulty. She was so dazed. She nodded. The girl leaned in close to May and whispered, Hard to believe, hard to believe Bo Clevo owns it, huh? Now, huh? What's the afterworld coming to? May followed the girl's eyes up to a set of enormous white steps that led to the doors of the edifice. Staggered all along the steps, their black teeth dripping and their bodies slick with slime, stood a whole troop of more than 50 looking ghouls, um, looking over the crowd suspiciously, scuttering back and forth beside the line that wound its way up the steps, and inspecting each ghost by poking and prodding them with the points of their spears. Two gargoyles lay on their haunches in front of the doors, and two others perched at either corner at the top of the doors, ready to pounce. And in the middle of it all, at the very center of the landing, and standing several stories tall, was a marble statue, its arms crossed, its features hidden in the folds of a marble cloak. Only its eyes showed, glowing a deep, burning red from underneath a marble hood. May felt a shudder run from the tips of her toes to the ends of her hair. She didn't need anyone to tell her who the figure was. She knew it deep down at the very root of her soul. They say a spirit's more likely to fit through the eye of a needle than to get into the edifice unnoticed, the girl continued in her low voice, not noticing that May had turned the ghostly shade of pale that was more suitable to her surroundings. All sorts of secret stuff is in there. Nobody knows what. May let out a deep breath. She suddenly realized she'd been holding in. How on earth had John the Gibber ever made it in? If she'd had even the tiniest hope of getting to the book on her own since she'd lost him, that now disappeared. It's a shame. The city's gotten to be so serious since the dark spirits moved in. So many rules. Well, that's the afterlife for you, I guess. Just the way it goes. The weight of despair that had been with May for the past few hours dragged her down even farther. I guess, she murmured. You may as well get in line. You may as well get in the line. May once again tore her eyes from the edifice. The line? For haunting assignments. From the High Ghost Court. I can tell you were new. She smiled sadly, chomping gum between her teeth. Every spirit has to go. It's where you get assigned your house to haunt. Oh, May surveyed the crowd. The girl continued, waggling her left stump sociably. You can request a house if you want. If another spirit is already there, the high ghosts will just assign you somewhere else. May blinked at her. Who are the high ghosts? Gosh, you really just got run over by the potato wagon, didn't you? It was a tractor that did me in. The girl blew a bubble with her gum. They're part of the ghost court, the highest law in the land. They still get their orders from the north, though the court's in the edifice. I'm sure it makes Bo Cleveland crazy angry, but he can't do a darn thing about it. Not for now, anyway. I guess he'll figure it out eventually. The girl nodded over her shoulder. You better get going. End of the line's that way. If you get there in time, they'll give you a number to mark your place, see? Chomping, the girl held up her number, which was scrawled on a glowing tile. 30,090. Thanks. Hold on, I just need to do something real quick. Okay. Thanks. Glancing from time to time at the edifice, May drifted along the crowd, hoping that she might catch a glimpse of a round pumpkin head and a yellow tuft of hair. She happened to see the front of the newspaper held in someone's hands. May could just make out part of one headline. Live One breaches city gates. Suddenly the crowd began to rustle and move about. Everyone gazed at the landing on top of the courthouse stairs. A figure draped in a white cloth, with 2 holes for eyes, drifted out, the goals on either side of him. The ghost spoke loudly, his voice booming. Hear ye, hear ye. Today's session is closed. Please come back tomorrow. Thank you. All over the square, a resigned grumble arose, and spirits began to drift and disperse in all directions. In a matter of minutes, though, the square was empty, and there was no pumpkin. The only thing that stood between May and the edifice was empty space, dotted with a couple of stragglers. Pumpkin, where are you? She whispered sadly. Keeping wide of the front of the stairs and the entrance, May walked with unsure steps to the west wall of the edifice. Stopping inches away, etched into the marble, and every spare space were the words in different languages. Hold on, sorry, I was not paying attention. Okay. In a matter of minutes, the oh no, keeping wide in front of keeping wide of keeping wide of the front stairs and the entrance, May walked with unsure steps to the west wall of the edifice, stopping inches away. Etched into the marble in every spare space were words in different languages. She read the one sheet that she could. I wish my mom would feel better. I wish I had a parrot. I wish I could fly. Before her eyes, new words would squeeze their way in with the ones that were already there. May reached out to touch the words, and a bolt of lightning ran through her fingers. She leaped back, staring at the edifice. Then she walked back across the square and into the nearest alleyway, dragging aimlessly until she found a sign pointing towards Sewerside. Sewerside turned out to be every bit as undesirable as the spirits at Mausoleum 387A had promised. May May tried to blend in as much as she walked along, but she had to fight not to gag at the smell. Now that she had arrived, she realized she had no idea how to find the hotel. The whole area was much bigger than she had expected. Than she had expected. Eventually, she noticed a phone booth standing in one corner. On a hunch, she ducked into it and looked for a phone book. There was one with there was one in the slot below the skull. She flipped through the hotel sections. Final rest, final rest. There it was, right between fade to black bed and breakfast the float on in and the float on in. Next to the name of the hotel were 2.5 gravestones. May read. Located on one of Suicide's quietest streets, the Final Rest is a popular haunt for outlaws, lost souls, and other spirits looking for a resting place that combines privacy and discretion. We recommend that families and those not desiring to associate with scalawags look elsewhere for their accommodation needs. 178 Minnie Moan's Way. May read out May read out loud this time. She looked around her. Well, that helps, she muttered sarcastically. Hold on. I need to adjust my stuff again. Oh, God. All right. What else do you need? A nasal voice asked. May looked at the scolophone, then at the scolophone book, then at her feet. A woman was sitting under the grating, with plugs in her ears, staring up at May. It's no Shangri-La, but we like to think we're an efficient city. What more were you looking for? I need to find out where 178 Minnie Moan's Way is. The woman rolled her eyes. Her face was blue. Just look at the map. In the back. She pointed one stump of a finger toward the book. Oh. May flipped through the last few pages. There it was. May looked at the index, then traced the line to Minnie Moan's Way with her fingers, then looked outside the booth to see what street she was on. That's only 3 blocks away. Thank you. The woman nodded. A few minutes later, May arrived at two large but decrepit doors covered in cobwebs, with ghostly spiders dangling from every corner. The building itself was small and squat, and looked like it would be too cramped for a house, much less a hotel. There was no mark on the door, but for the street number. May pulled on one of the handles, gently at first. Then, with all her might, it opened with a loud groan. Oh, yeah, definitely getting bigger on the inside. Okay. A few minutes. Oh, wait, no. It opened with a loud groan, sending a cloud of dust flying at her face and setting off a jangling bell. May hurriedly stepped inside and waved her hands in front of her face, coughing. When the dust appeared, a small man in an ascot stood before her, grinning with a mouthful of crooked teeth. Her face was covered in red bumps, a few of which oozed green. Come in, come in. He waved May forward. A name tag on his vest read, Connor O'Kinney. He ushered May into a dingy marble foyer that sprawled below. He ushered May into a dingy marble foyer that sprawled below a giant chandelier. I almost said chandelier. Because, chandelier. Get it? Chandler, do you get it? Do you though? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm so funny, aren't I? I'm like the funniest ever. Ever. Okay, back to the thing. But seriously, I was about to say chandelier. Um, he ushered May inside. He ushered May into a dingy marble foyer that sprawled below a giant, uh, uh, a giant chandelier, uh, covered in webs and spiders. At one end, a large marble staircase with an ebony banister that had been mostly rotted away spiraled upward. May could hardly believe she was in a building that looks. May could hardly believe she was in the building that had looked so tiny from outside. What can I do for you? I'm looking for a room, sir. Room 9999. Ah, you want that one, do you? Not a problem, not a problem. Connor walked behind a large wooden desk that was missing one leg. May watched him as he flipped through the pages of the book, unable to keep from staring at the scars on his face. The fever it was, he said, making May blush and look at her feet. No need to be embarrassed, child. Took my whole town. Plenty of nice specters walking around with boils like this. Let's see. 9,999. 9,999. Oh. Connor frowned. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. The room's taken. By a ghost with a big head? May begged breathlessly. No, it was a specter, in fact. Can I interest you in another room? I have a suite just a few floors below that's quite as popular and available. May shifted from foot to foot, crushed. Well, do you mind if I wait in the lobby a while? I'm hoping to meet someone. Connor frowned. Most spirits coming in here don't relish being looked at. Discretion is one of our selling points. Well, can I get can I just get a room on that same hall? May couldn't quite believe her own pushiness, but she set her chin. Connor, apparently annoyed now, looked in his book. 9440 is available. Just below the stairs up the ninth floor. Turn left, and it's the 4720th door on the left. But 4,000? But 4,000? Connor already appeared. Connor already appeared preoccupied, so May did what she said. She followed the marble staircase, which swept past each floor regally. Again, May marveled at how much space could fit in such a tiny building. When she reached the ninth floor, she entered what seemed into a seemingly endless hallway and started walking. But it only took a few minutes to get to to get to wait. But it only took a few minutes to get to door 9440. She stopped, deciding to walk down to room 9999, and if she could get her courage up, knock on the door and ask the spirit there if they would mind changing rooms or if they'd keep an eye out for Pumpkin. The hallway was lined with several full-length portraits. Each was a painting of Connor himself, standing with the spirit who May assumed had been a customer. The one she stood in front of now had darkly slanting eyes, tan skin, and a massive beard. To Connor, it was inscribed. Thanks for the comfy bed and the fabulous service. XO, Attila. Excuse me, miss, a voice said, and a hand clapped down on May's shoulder, giving her a little jolt before spinning her around. A figure stood, looking no worse for wear and grinning. He was wearing a big straw hat, a jangly necklace with miniature eternal with a. He was wearing a big straw hat, a jangly necklace with a miniature eternal edifice dangling from the bottom, and a sack over his shoulder. A length of chain curled out on one side of it, with a tag attached that read, "My house ghost visited the city of Ether, and all I got were these lousy shackles." Before May could throw out her arms to hug him, or even exclaim, Pumpkin wrinkled his nose at her. "You smell horrible," he said. Standing on the balcony of the ninth floor of the Final Rest Hotel, a guest was treated to the view of the seedier buildings of Suicide. God, every time I say that fucking word, I'm just like, I'm pronouncing suicide in a weird way. But no, it's sewer side. My God. Finding out just how much more grim this book actually is. Alright, anyway. Standing on the balcony of the ninth floor of the Final Rest Hotel, a guest was treated to a view of the seedier buildings of Suicide, a slice of the city wall, and in the distance, a gaggle of pyramids far across the desert. Tonight, those triangles were surrounded by giant points of light, Fires lit for an all-night vigil being held while the inhabitants of the pyramids looked for big ears. When the alarm had sounded the evening before, just as Somber Kitty's paws had hit the ground after his long tumble from the sky, every inhabitant of New Egypt had fanned out over the desert after him, swinging their nets and beating the small desert brushes in search of the missing cat. Hours later, long after most had finally floated back to their homes for rest, Somber Kitty crept out from behind the reeds along a wide stream full of green liquid and peered around to make sure the coast was clear. His eyes tilted in the direction of the pyramids, listening for any suspicious sounds. It seemed that he was safe. Staying alert, he crept up to the edge of the stream where he discovered several hand-woven baskets, apparently made by the Egyptians, sitting on the bank. Somebody sniffed them, then touched the surface of the stream with one dainty paw, shaking off the liquid with a wrinkle in his nose. It smelled horrible. He backed up and let his eyes follow the current toward the horizon, where the city he had seen from his chamber rose up, far away and majestic. It still gave him a trembly feeling to look at, way down in his gut. Somebody looked at the baskets resting by the river and, after thinking for a moment, nudged one into the stream with his nose. He stood back and watched it float along and out of sight. He looked back toward the city. Meow, he asked. A noise arose from behind the bushes. Summer Kitty didn't think twice. He put his front paws into the next basket and pushed it forward with his back legs, yanking them inside at the moment the basket hit the water. The basket tottered, but stayed afloat, and only his tail could be seen above the lip of it as it drifted with the current in the direction of Ether. Oh god, and that is the end of that chapter. 23. Was it really 2 chapters? 23 to 20 and 24. 23, 24. Nice. Thank you for listening. Stop recording.